Well, I guess we're live. Cool. Anyway, wanted to discuss John Maddox and basically under the idea of Daddy, why did God create young Earth creationists? You know, it's a question that a child could ask. It's a question I ask myself every day. Why would God make young Earth creationists? I don't understand. And Maddox is extremely condescending, and he caught my eye early on, with the condescension. And I started listening to him and looking at his videos, and then I did a debate with him. And what I gleaned from him is he fancies himself a programmer. And so he was talking about, the first thing I caught is he was talking about programming and, like he was a professional programmer. And then he started saying things that no professional programmer would ever say. And me and a couple other programmers almost choked, just listening to him. So it was obvious that that was not his expertise. And then he came up with a whole lot of stuff about, like the first thing I watched was with RJ on ribosomal pausing. And it kind of goes to a greater theme that creationists like. They like to go out and read a paper and ambush you and say, have you heard about, And ribosomal pausing is kind of an obscure little piece that first surfaced up in the 80s, I think, with yeast. Basically, they found evidence that there were certain particles or certain sequences in the DNA that would cause a ribosomal pause. And I don't understand all of the mechanisms, and I don't think any of us do, as to how it pauses and then it starts up again.
You're talking about during translation?
Or during translation, yeah. Did I say transcription?
No, I was just wondering.
During translation. So basically, there are several reasons for ribosomes to pause along the line. One of them is that you can't find a matching tRNA. That there's basically rates based on how many amino acids are available and all of that,
with the necessary anticodon,
right. Yeah. And so that's one part. That's where they found out that neutral substitutions are can have an effect. And what happens if it can't find the right tRNA is the ribosomes will pile up on the mRNA.
Right.
And it will kick the protein sequence out and it will get eaten. Basically, It gets eaten. So, but then they found out just recently, I think around 2014, that occasionally this is a good thing. That there are certain signal particles or signal sequences, consensus sequences in the DNA that will pause the ribosome, and it allows the protein to fold differently than it would have folded if it had gone full force.
Huh.
And this, they discovered this probably in one or two cases. Of course, we know that there are about 400 millions of proteins, right? So this is certainly not proof that this mechanism exists for every protein. So it's but anyway, so Maddox ambushed RJ. And it's that tactic of pulling some brand new paper or even an old paper out of their butts and saying, did you know about, and the condescension was dripping off this guy's tongue. And then I started listening to him, and he seemed to have learned a great deal about ribosomes. And then I realized that was sort of the bottom of his barrel.
With Standing and guys like that and Maddox, it seems like they will hone in on one little thing, this one very thin aspect of it, and they'll try to use that as the argument. But the problem is they don't have a base, they don't have a foundation for understanding genetics generally, or whatever it is generally. And so as soon as you try to ask them, how does this fit in with the larger network of things going on here, they're like, well, here's this other paper, and so I have that interaction regularly with creationists. It's just there's no there beyond the blip, the little argument. So
right. Standing is real cool because when you hit him on one of these things, he will go ahead and he'll pass over that very quickly, and then he'll put out 5 of his favorites, his little buzzwords. He'll say orphan genes and ERVs, and he goes on this little gallop, and then he ends it with 2 things. He ends it with a question and a bait for the scientist talking to him, and the scientist can't resist the bait because it was just too alluring. So then you'll be on to another subject, and then he'll do the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I've analyzed the structure of some of these arguments. This basically Maddoxs, I went through one of his videos, and his video is called what do we got? The raw download on the genetic code being a programming language, where he did a entire piece that consisted of as near as I can tell 1 sentence. I had trouble finding pauses, and some of his sentences are like, holy shit, was that a sentence? Immutable Destiny and I have tried to dissect his stuff online in real time, and we can't, because he'll come up with these sentences where like our heads are just spinning like, what did he say? What does he even mean?
It's funny you say that because Erica Gutsick Gibbon.
Yeah, I've talked to her. Yeah.
She did a debate with Raw Matt, and she is like, I don't know if it was just because I was tired or what, but I couldn't even figure out what his argument was.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't even parse it. And in this one, he was going on and on about, my God, he mentioned, of course, as a programmer, he mentioned a representative relational programming language. You never, relational programming language would be like SQL.
Okay.
He was just throwing words out, and it was just so. And then he mentions HTML, CSS, and JavaScript compiling the binary, and I almost ate a bird. I mean, and there were some other programmers that commented on it and said, "Dude, stop it! You don't know what you're talking about." It's like, and then he comes up with the binary code for the letter A, and he missed a whole bunch of zeros, and I was like, "No, it's not 01001. No, it's 01000001. It's like, damn it."
Oh, it's all in my head.
Yeah, so it was obvious that he was trying to represent himself as something that he wasn't, and then he goes on to try to make this argument, and his whole argument basically boils down to, if you believe that there's a code in DNA, then you have to believe that this is like a programming language, and if you believe that, and you believe that evolution was natural, then you have to believe that all programming languages were created naturally. That's his argument.
An excessively convoluted argument. It's the problem is one of the many problems with that argument is you can't get creationists to think about phylogenies because they're creationists, even within their alleged accepted phylogenies, things like up to the family level or the order level, whatever. You can't get them to conceptualize genetic events among species.
Right.
An example that I like to bring up is there's this insect called the water strider. The specific genus of it is called Ragavalia. Well, within this genus, a certain set of the species, not all of them, just a certain set of them, have a duplication of a certain gene, which allows them to have these little novel propeller fan structures on their limbs.
Yeah.
There's only some of the species within this genus, meaning if you're going to either the entire genus, which is below the level of family, evolved naturally, in which case this duplication occurred naturally and the propeller fans occurred naturally, or you can argue that the kind level is way below genus. It's in fact the species, in which case you're booking the arc for like tens of millions of species.
Right.
And so they're kind of they're stuck. They're stuck there, but they don't conceptualize these things because to them it's almost like everything is neutral variation. The difference between a coyote and a wolf is like all neutral variation. You know, it's just differences in the alleles. There are no new genes involved, things like that, no duplicated genes. And so even in the case of even when you try to get them to think about orphan genes, they don't think about orphan genes in the level of family, because orphan genes are typically restricted to either the genus or the species. Or I said orphan genes at the level of family, I meant the species. But you can't get them to think about these things because it's just, as you said, it's just a buzzword. These are buzzwords that they're just kind of peppering their arguments with because they heard it from Jensen or they heard it from Sanford or Tomkins, one of these guys who works for AIG. They don't really know what the argument means, but it sounds very good, very sciencey. It sounds like it supports us,
right?
You know, and so you literally can't get them to conceptualize these sorts of things because they don't think in terms of systematics. They don't think in terms of as RJ likes to say, a map of time. They have no map of time, and so it's all just fog bank. Everything is just kind of out there.
I just did a hangout with a bunch of hangouts with Sal Cordova. Are you familiar with him?
I had him on my channel, and I'm so glad PZ was there when I did.
Oh, really? When did you have him on your channel?
Was that 20? I think that was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, and because he had commented on video or someone else had talked to me about him. But anyways, I got in touch with him. And he came on, very pleasant. And fortunately, PZ Myers was in the chat. And so Cordova would say things like, this is irreducibly complex for this and this and this reason, couldn't have evolved. And PZ goes, no, is he not familiar with this? And so I would say, PZ Myers says, are you familiar with this? And he goes, well, next argument. And we did that like 3 times. And so I eventually said, it sounds like all of your arguments are, you claim something is irreducibly complex right up until the point that your argument is debunked, in which case you just run to the next topic.
Next argument, right?
Yeah, and so it's,
Yeah, that's one of the memes that are incredible. But anyway, Sal Cordova was on, I think I talked to him, and then he was on Standing for Truth's channel, and he talked about these signs. Signs and lines.
Short repeats and longer. Yeah.
And he showed this paper and he had an argument that set me back, and I thought, whoa. And he said, no evolutionist wants to talk to me about this. And I emailed him within 5 seconds and I said, here's one. I want to talk to you. So I spent a few days looking into it, and let's see if I can share a whole screen here.
As far as I remember, they're like part of the joke DNA, aren't they? Lines and signs.
Yeah. They're, for the most part, they have some regulatory effects. Okay, you see this graph right here. Can you see it well? I'm not sure.
I can't really see the words. I mean, I see the graphs, and I see the spaces.
Okay, I'll try to mouse over it. But anyway, so the mouse and the rat diverged at some point, and they have a certain amount of signs, and then the signs probably had a few mutations. According to them, these the sign types were B1, B2, B3 for the mouse, and L1 for the rat. And they said, okay, so, but the thing was that these different signs ended up right here in this line C right here. They ended up in the same places. So there's this correlation, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's like, whoa, why would there be, if they split 20 million years ago, why would these signs and lines be at the same spot? And they use the example of the book Jane Eyre. And if you changed Mary Eyre, and then you would have to change all the text in each individual part. So I'm like, okay, that sounds reasonable. So I slept on it. And the next day I woke up, and then my first question was, I thought the rat and the mouse were the same kind. So wouldn't they have the same problem? Because if they both got off the ark, right?
Yeah. Well, what that would be Muridae is is I believe
Are they
mice
two?
and rats. So that would be the same. That would be the same family. So if we're going at the level of family, then yeah, they would be the same kind. Yeah.
Right. So they have the same problem. But anyway, what I found out is where's my mouse? What I found out is the reason that and it turns out that B1, B2, and B3 and L1 are all present in both the rat and the mouse. And I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the sequences. They're fairly small. I think they're about 120 bases or something like that. And yeah, about 120 bases in the gene. But the reason they pop into the same spot is that frequently these signs in all species or all mammals will insert before a bunch of active genes, and they frequently insert on the signal that starts the duplication of a gene.
Okay.
Basically, I think it's called an ORC. So there is a very good reason why, even if the sequence diverged 20 million years ago, why they would end up in the same spots. And I ran that by Cell, and I said, okay, Cell, so your shit is debunked, which is a word they love. And he was like, no, I have to think about this. And he hasn't gotten back to me yet. But Cell is a good guy, and I've talked to him at length, and I've had really wonderful personal discussions with him.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to do a series on his channel, Me and Immutable, where he's going to call it An Atheist Schools a Creationist on Organic Chemistry. So we're going to try teaching the basics of organic chemistry. And I'm going to go as far as I go, and then Immutable is going to take over for the rest of it.
Organic chemistry was not fun. I did not enjoy that class.
Oh, hell. I got into it when I was 13 years old. I stole a book. I read World of Carbon by Isaac Asimov, and then I went and borrowed a book from the Virginia Public Library in northern Minnesota, and I went crazy. I mean, when I saw carbon chemistry, my young mind went nuts, and I tried to create a mathematics to create structures, structural complexity, and I never succeeded. I was too naive, and I didn't know any math. So I love it.
The flipping the if you have like chair conformation and all that, and so you have to totally flip it and tell what configuration is this in. I was like, oh please no. And I made it, but ugh.
The 3D stuff is a little heavy. Fortunately, I have a book with 3D glasses, so you can actually play. Plus, I've got I'm always dragging this thing out, the
yeah,
that's an actual protein, but it kind of fell apart on me. So anyway, the 3D structure stuff is hard, and there are some things that are hard, but the complexity of it is wonderful. So I made a few notes here. So now one of the memes. Anyway, on that sign thing, you debunk it, and then they just move on to something else, and it just goes on and on. And it took me 4 days of research. It took him 5 minutes to present it. So that's what we're up against. It's just like, because I mean,
it's all neither willing to to leave it or defend it, or something like that. Yeah, abandon it or defend it. So yeah,
I had to put a picture of the condescension in this thing. Him condescending. Oh, I did a debate with him, and he got really pissed off at me because, okay, I knew his style, right? And I knew what he was going to do was he was going to go after me and try to find something I didn't know about. And so I went after him instead. And he got kind of irritated when I asked him to give me a source for a paper. I pulled an RJ. It's called pulling an RJ now.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He gets real mad about that, from what I understand.
He got really irritated with me. And then he got irritated with me because he was trying to get me to say that, well, a concept is not material, right? And I said, no. In my worldview, everything is material. Everything is physical, right? And I wouldn't do his spirit talk. So then it all devolved from there. We never actually. But the bottom line of the debate I had with him, and I summed it up in the end, is that he has this thing, oh, it's so complex, it's got coding, it looks like programming, therefore it had to have an intelligent designer. And my point with him is that there is no connection between the antecedent, the consequent, between the if and the then. He has no connection. There is no connection between it's complex, so it needs intelligence. And one interesting thing, the first paper I looked at that he linked out of his papers, I forget which one it was here. It was not wave function, but anyway, the first paper that he linked in that chat for the debate with RJ the other night, in the second paragraph said, "Life is no machine." Quote, "Life is no machine."
I can't argue with that.
I mean, it was a total opposite of, what Maddox's position is. And this was in a paper that he provided. I couldn't believe it.
That's funny.
But here's one meme here, the new Discovery theme meme. It's let's see. What is he talking about here? Whether or not DNA genetic code is okay, high level talking points, the atheist world. It's interesting that he said he was a researcher, or that in the research that he's done, and I've never seen a paper by this guy, but they come up with some new discovery, and the new discovery now, or in the last, actually it's been going strong since about 1990, picking up steam in 2012, I think it was. You remember that big conference where the evolutionists, Gold and everybody were going after each other in 1986?
You're talking about like the debate over punctuated equilibrium?
It was over a lot of things, punctuated equilibrium, and it was over the new idea that biology is basically semiotics and information and a whole bunch of other things.
Well, maybe
I think it started. Anyways, gained steam since 2012, and he listed a whole bunch of papers from the Royal Society. They did a whole chapter on it, basically on DNA as information and semiotics and all of that. And that stack of papers I showed you was a printout of about 1/4 of the papers that I found on it. And it's so it's a new discovery, and it's they will frequently use this new discovery is proving creationism meme, right? Over and over again.
And yet there are like no creationists who are actual scientists.
Right. And none of the people that are doing the new discoveries agree with anything they're saying.
Yeah. It's almost like they're completely out of touch with reality.
Exactly.
It's that sort of thing makes me, it makes me frustrated, but also makes me laugh because you have intelligent design people. It's really more them who are always saying like, we're on the forefront of the research. Bull crap! You guys haven't done any research in years because you're all writing articles for the Discovery Institute. So it's very funny to me. It's also very frustrating because it's like just out of touch with reality. So
I don't know. Let's see. It's way the hell at the top. I captured all the comments too on this. I can't find it. Anyway, he was saying it was quite cocky, quite honest, stunning ignorances. Let's see. And so often they completely gloss over what is actually being discovered and the research that I've done and the papers that I've read. This is the new discovery meme in action. It's just ridiculous. It goes on and on. It was interesting when I debated him at the very beginning of the debate. He quoted from Dennis Noble's book. I forget what the name of the book is. From Dennis Noble's book, and I had the book open on my desk, and I had just read the page prior to where he quoted. Mm-hmm. And he said something about DNA being a programming language. Mm-hmm. And on the next page, Dennis Noble makes the case that it's not.
There's a video that that ideas. Also, can you? This is on YouTube currently.
Yes.
Can you post the link for me in the little side chat here, please?
Yeah, I think where do I have it?
But
Me.
Dennis Noble, he's kind of interesting. There's a video that's been floating around for a couple of years where it's him giving a lecture, and he starts by saying, by kind of criticizing the selfish gene concept, which does deserve a bit of criticism, but overall it's a decent idea. And he goes on from there, and he talks about epigenetics, and he talks about a few other really basic, a few other ideas that are basic to geneticists, but intelligent designers present this video. And eventually I just watched it because it's like an hour long, and I watched through the whole thing, and I was like, okay, this is all stuff that you learn in an undergraduate genetics class.
Right.
What do you think the argument is here? And they're like, I can't get an answer from them.
Yeah. Yeah, they like Dennis Noble because he sort of runs counter to the he had a big fight with Dawkins over the selfish gene, right? That sort of thing.
I mean, some of the stuff, and he's right. It's not really
he's right.
Gene, it's a selfish genome.
Right.
You know, it's the whole thing, and you know, that's understandable. So, whatever.
Let's see. Response to. I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Okay. It's this link right here. I'll put it in chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I'll put it in major chat. Emo got on. I keep inviting Emo to come to one of my hangouts, but he never does. He always blows me out. He just ignores me. You guys just ignore me. I'm just old and irrelevant. I'm old and irrelevant. Anyway, yeah, so this is the video right here. So anyway, and I did a transcript of it, and I went through and I just tried to carefully analyze it. It's really hard for me to stay on track. I have a lot of work to do. I mean, I'm plowing through Lewin's Genes 12. That's a major book. I'm doing I have a 15-inch stack of books on tetrapod limb development. So right. I'm trying to work out the basics of fin to limb, basically. And one of my books, in fact, is named Fins to Limbs. And I got a whole bunch of other fascinating books back here on that. Fins into Limbs, and the vertebrate body, and vertebrate paleontology, and I'm crap at paleontology and basic phylogeny.
I love all that stuff. That's all I do.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, but I'm my primary thing is molecular biology and genetics. That's my primary thrust, and embryology. So I'm figuring out how those little tiny cartilage islands in the fin differentiated into humerus, radius, ulna, and the autopod, which is the fingers. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to do a thing, and Erica said that she may have me on her channel when they address that to talk about basically the evolution of the limb. And it's so obvious when you look at the paleontology, when you look at just the anatomy that we have today. I mean, you just look at a dogfish or a bowfin. We have them here in Minnesota, and when you catch them and throw them on the shore, they walk back in the water.
Yeah, bowfins are they're part of the very primitive or the more primitive fish. They're not actually even teleosts. You have after the split between the lobe-fin fish, which includes us, and the ray-fin fish, you have bichers. Yeah, bichers are actually very interesting because there have been experiments where researchers will have them in these very wet environments. And if you start them like crawling on land at a very young age, their fins will actually develop like that of lobe-finned fish. They're after they're very primitive. You also have gars are another one, bowfins, sturgeons, paddlefish. They're all very primitive. They, in fact, most of them have the remains either of lungs or the pulmonary artery, supplying where oxygen is being supplied to the bloodstream from the lungs. So yeah, they have the vestigial remnants of these things. They're that primitive and so, or that basally derived with respect to the teleosts. So
yeah, they can breathe. They can breathe out of water for, I don't know, 24 hours, 2 days.
Yeah,
and they'll walk back in.
Yeah, it's very helpful if you're a freshwater fish to be able to breathe out of water, because you can a lot of times you run into like anoxic bodies of water, things like that, algal blooms, and so it's that being able to breathe, take gulps of air is necessary. So.
One of the things I want to do this summer is I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a microscope here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 3 to 180 stereoscope, and you can't see it very well there, but I can
see it. Yeah,
I want to go get a bowfin. It's a pretty substantial scope. It's professional. I want to go get a bowfin, and I want to dissect the limb. And so I'm going to go out to the boat landing and try to. People get really mad when they catch one of those. They call them dogfish. But I want one, you know. I mean, I prefer one.
Yeah.
And you catch them all the time. But anyway, so I'm working on that a little bit, and it's so easy to see how these morphogenetic fields in an embryo, with just a very slight modification, can turn from one little island of cartilage into a long bony structure, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's I don't understand how anybody can deny that evolved. You know, that we went from fins to limbs.
Oh yeah, we have fish in the fossil record that have the humerus, radius, and ulna. On Panderichthys, Tiktaalik, all these guys have the arm structure. They still have the little fin rays on the end, but they have the arm structure, and so it's right. Very hard to look at this and think, really? We're not, you know, this is not part of our ancestry. And of course, they usually try to come back with, you know, oh, the mud skipper can walk out of water too. But the mud skipper's fins are very different.
Right.
They modified the ray fins. They didn't modify lobe fins. So it's the goby body plan, but on land. It's that's the modification. And so it's, you know, it's very easy to kind of rebut these sorts of arguments.
Yeah, and the rays, I think, are a derivative of scales, basically scales on the surface. They're not directly related to the the fingers, the autopodia.
Mm.
They're that was a different kind of an explosion. The zygopod.
Yeah,
I forget names when I'm online. And the stylopod basically were there, but then the autopod developed out of that. And it was not, I mean, my first naive thing was, the fins, you know, the rays on the fins developed into fingers, but that isn't quite what happened. Those are more like dermal or episodic.
Yeah, I think Neil Shubin has done some papers, and his colleagues have done papers on the autopods are likely a de novo structures that evolved over time. So
and there's a whole section in that book, Fins to Limbs, or Fins into Limbs, on that, and a bunch of papers on it that I'm kind of plowing through. But back to our buddy here. But anyway, it was amazing. And then Nephilim, I did a hangout with him, and he mentioned a book by Coonan, and I had the book in front of me.
Yeah.
Again. And he had a quote from Coonan. And then at the back of the book, Coonan says, ID is malicious nonsense. Same.
Eugene Coonan is one of like the greatest evolutionary biologists alive today.
Yes.
So for him to be cited, because there's a paper by him back in, was it 2004 or something like that? He wrote, it was titled Uprooting the Phylogenetic Tree. Okay. When you read the paper, it's perfectly fine. It's a very good paper. It's talking about the fact that horizontal gene transfer occurs between bacteria and archaeans, meaning the base of the tree of life is actually a bush because they're intersecting constantly.
Right.
And creationists and ideas will cite the title and they'll say, Coonan destroyed evolution. You didn't read the freaking paper.
Read at least the abstract or the first paragraph.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh my God.
Well, the same thing with the paper that Maddoxs linked the other night. I mean, it's totally. all of these papers, and Standing for Truth does it too. Raw Matt, every paper I've looked into is just completely reverses what they're saying. Like the stuff that Raw Matt cited on ApoA1 Milano had nothing to do with what he was talking about. It was just, someday I'm going to do some videos on Raw Matt.
I think I don't know. I question his ability to actually read.
He can't.
Did you see the video that EvoGrad posted on my channel?
I did. I just saw that. I listened to him talk about it with Erica a few weeks back on Steve's channel. So
yeah, I really do question his ability to read. I'm not sure he can. And it's like, if he can't, he needs help. He doesn't need to be throwing out papers that he literally cannot read. He needs to like stop and learn how to read these things. And so,
one of the abstracts that he cited, and somebody did it on, I forget, maybe it was your channel, but one of the abstracts that he cited was talking about a modification to a gene where the protein moved from the cytoplasm to the membrane.
That was a response to the video I did. Yeah,
he misread it basically as the gene moving. You know, the DDX11 thing.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, it was talking about the two or the gene that was relocalized, and there was the fusion event. Yes, that was
right. And the gene was not relocalized. It was the damn protein.
Yeah. It was the fact that he thought like the gene itself moved.
Yeah, and he showed an arrow basically, like saying that we misinterpreted the arrow on one of Tomkins' cartoons that he drew.
Yeah,
for the DDX11.
It was laughable. It's or the other one he did, which I just loved. I love that he thought the chart showing genetic differences within populations of a certain size was actually saying birds were more closely related to humans than chimps are.
Yeah.
The fact, like,
the barcode thing, right?
You read the chart titles. Literally, just read them. I mean, oh my god.
Yeah. It's just there's so much. There is so much.
It is pathetically bad, and it makes. I don't watch Standing for Truth stuff. I don't watch Raw Matt. I don't watch Nephilim. I don't watch anybody for the lulz. I can't. I don't have the capacity. But
I can't watch Nephilim anymore.
Yeah, but EvoGrad's video on them was stupendous because it shows just how pathetically bad they are at making arguments. You know,
and Tomkins with DDX11 L2. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I went ahead and wrote a Python program to graph the real DDX11 gene. Turned it into basically the protein translation, and the gene is I don't know, it's like 700 amino acids, or not the gene, but the protein is. Okay. And DDX11 is like 160 amino acids, and DDX11 has 9 active motifs in the protein that fold up, and DDX11 L2 it has just the remnant of one of them, and nobody mentions this, and they constantly say it's a highly functional helicase gene.
Well, have you seen Tomkins' own paper on the DDX11L2 expression is indistinguishable from random noise, according to his own paper.
His own paper,
His own paper said it was indistinguishable from random noise, his own analysis. And so the fact that he thinks that he tries to argue it's highly functional and his own paper refutes him, it's absolute gold.
I mean, it's highly functional. It's missing all 9 of the active motifs of a DDX11 gene. And it just blows me away. I've been taking a bioinformatics course, and I'm trying to locate that little remnant in the chimpanzee genome, but I haven't successfully done it yet.
Yeah, the fact that you have a telomere specific gene family right next to the alleged telomere spot, that can't be a coincidence, can it?
Well, I took one of the Hox genes from chromosome 2, and I calculated the location. Okay, the on NCBI. So I got the number, and then what the hell did I do? I subtracted. I got it in the chimpanzee from the beginning of 2B, and I calculated. I took that number, and then I went to the human chromosome 2 location for the same Hox gene. I subtracted from that location, and guess where I ended up? Right on the fusion site. Just exactly. I mean, it was just it was perfect. I mean, it was just, you could see it so dramatically, and they deny it over and over, and they're debunking chromosome 2. It just, oh my god.
Yeah,
there is so much. What are we?
Yeah, they are really just pathetically bad at making arguments, and they are, Dunning-Kruger poster children. It's kind of funny how they just run across all these topics. They have no knowledge of any of these topics. They don't bother to do any research on these topics. They just read, well, Tomkins said or Jensen said, and that makes it true. They don't follow up on his sources. They claim they do. They don't. They just say, oh, well, he used secular sources. Read the sources. What are they saying? And what is he saying that they say? And what is his analysis saying? They don't do any of that. They just say, oh, look, he proved this.
Yeah.
Did he? Did he prove that? Really?
No, he said it.
Yeah, he said. Yeah, he said he proved it. His analysis of the mitochondrial Eve and the distribution of the mitochondrial haplogroups, and he completely misrepresents the chart. He exaggerates completely part of it. Yeah, no.
It looks to me like he has a force graph that he created, and I've been trying to recreate it because with a force graph, you can move the bubbles around any way you want. Mm-hmm. And I think you could make the bat signal. I mean, you could create the bat signal or any cartoon you want out of that information if you want to,
Yeah, but as soon as you try to root it, it's this. His analysis is totally wrong. So
yeah,
exaggerated.
Yep. Yeah, and I know that they do not research this, and I know that because if you look at my crappy little channel, you'll see no production values at all. And you go look at Standing for Truth, and they're producing 40 videos a month, and they have pretty good production values. The reason that I don't have good production values on my YouTube videos is because I'm studying genetics. I mean, I know that they don't know enough to read those papers.
Yeah, I would love. I actually have an example of that. I've never done it with Standing, though. I would love to. RJ and I went on Nephilim Free's channel. I know, big mistake, but we did, and he made a claim about. I don't remember what the claim was. I don't remember what the paper was, but it was about the chimpanzee genome and how it relates to ours. But this paper was talking about a very specific subset of deleterious alleles. Neff was claiming this paper was making some claim about like the mutation rate generally, and it was not. It just wasn't about that. And we're like, okay, Neff, send us the paper. So he sends it to us. We look at it. We say, Neff, this isn't saying at all what you think it says. And he's like, well, he says, that doesn't matter. And then he makes the claim again. And we're like, Neff, you just did that. That's not what this paper says. And he says, actually, now that I remember, we did do that with Standing also. He sent us a paper on this finch, which there was a new Galapagos finch species, which resulted from hybridization.
Yeah, it's their favorite now. They love that one.
Yeah, and he cites the paper. It's a fine paper, but he cites it and he says this proves created heterozygosity. And we look at it, and RJ and I look at the paper and we say, this. They say in the paper that the genetics, the genetic bottleneck within this finch species is expected because it's a hybrid. And we say, okay, this is a hybridization event, and this happened, and they say this was expected. How does that help you? And he had no answer. Yeah. He had no answer to that. And so, yeah, you know,
Yeah, that Finch is their poster child, basically for created heterozygosity. I call it created heterozygolousness.
it's just a buzzword. It again that it goes back to what we were saying earlier with where they don't think about systematics.
Yeah.
If you try to apply their concept of created heterozygosity, you end up with ludicrously non-parsimonious trees.
I don't know.
Yeah, where basically the ancestor had all of the genes, but preferentially lost them in certain ways. And if you try to track this like a phylogeny, it makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
And so yeah, no, because they won't think about it. They literally don't think about it. They can't conceptualize organisms. They say organisms are related to each other. This species is related to that species, but they don't ever think about what that means.
Right.
They will not conceptualize that. They cannot.
Yeah.
I would contend. So, yeah.
So that's the thing about people that believe this stuff. These young Earth creationists, there's this block that they come to. It's like when you're about to see something that is going to change your view on something, and you stop completely, and you can no longer. You can't see it anymore. And so you get real nervous and you let your mind wander off into another topic. Now, I'm always very transparent about the fact that I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. And the interesting thing is when you are an alcoholic and you've got this big meeting coming up tomorrow, if you've seen the movie Flight Plan with Denzel Washington, there's just a real good depiction of what it is to be an alcoholic. So you got this meeting coming up and you think, okay, I'm going to stay sober. I'm going to make the meeting, get a good night's sleep. I'm going to be fine. And then about 8:00, you think, oh God, I kind of need a drink. And then your mind there'll be a part of your mind screaming, here are the facts, dude. You got a meeting tomorrow. You're going to screw this up. Don't do it. But you're like, no, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And you basically get in your car and you drive to the liquor store, you get drunk out of your mind, you screw the meeting up, you get fired, and then 3 days later you do it again, even though even though every part of your rational mind tells you that this is wrong, don't do this. And I think the same thing is at play with certain far right voters and creationists and climate deniers and all of these people that are into these weird, I don't know what the hell, what do they get out of it? Why did God make YEC'S? I don't know. It just,
I would think if any reason, I think the best argument against God's existence is young Earth creationism, but
exactly.
But apologists for it, I should say. But yeah, I think they really do believe this. I think maybe Kent Hovind doesn't believe this and he's doing it all for money. Okay, maybe. But yeah. I think Standing for Truth believes this. I think Raw Matt believes it. I think Nephilim Free, Ken Ham. I think they are all very sincere in believing young Earth creationism. Some of them, like Todd Wood, will even go out and say, okay, yeah, evolution's true. It makes predictions. It works. Don't say evolution's wrong, but I choose not to believe it. And I'm going to interpret things in light of my own personal young Earth creationist beliefs. You have people like him, like Kurt Wise, who say things like that. Standing for Truth's never going to listen to that. He's never going to hear those sorts of things because he's listening to. Because what the really funny thing is, the creationists at like AIG, the ones who are actually versed in these fields, are saying, yeah, evolution's true, but whereas the ones who are not versed in the fields, like John Woodmarap, will just be like, no, evolution's false. There's no geologic column. None of that's true. It's funny because there's this total disconnect between the upper echelon people and the lower echelon creationists. And for people like Standing and like your average creationist, you never see the disconnect. You never see the infighting over these sorts of things. It just doesn't come up. And so RJ and I love to document that kind of stuff in the rocks are there, and he does it in his tip project. So yeah, it's great.
That's why I like Cell Cordova, and also I'm very fascinated by him because he's smart enough, he's inquisitive enough, and he's learning, and he knows that some of this stuff doesn't work, and yet he still believes in the whole spiel, and I think he's right on the edge, or right in the fuzzy part. And other creationists and ideas get mad at him, but I like talking to Cell because. Like, and it was cool to see him on Standing for Truth's channel when they brought up genetic entropy, and Cell kind of said, "Yeah, that applies maybe to humans, but he wasn't buying it for the he wasn't going to talk about it for the rest of the species." And then,
and was it that James Crow paper from like the 90s or whatever?
Which one
was that? The one where he says we're declining at like. What is it? 1%?
Oh, no, Kondrashov. What's his name? Alexei Kondrashov says something like, "It's amazing that we're still alive," or something like that.
Oh yeah, because we're like post-industrial and all that, and so we've kicked natural selection.
Oh,
so
Crow. Okay, you're talking about Crow. Crow was obsessed with radiation, basically. So he was obsessed with what radiation is doing or could do to our genome. So he's the one that kicked it off. But then Alexei Kondrashov had that line that Standing likes to produce, that it's amazing that we haven't died 100 times over.
Yeah.
And Kondrashov has a book called The Crumbling Genome that I have, where he does a big, long treatment of the problem with the human genome and the fact that we are no longer being naturally selected to the degree that we used to be. But at the end of the book, he has no conclusion. Okay, he's raising a bunch of possibilities and questions, but they will slide from talking about humans. I don't want to talk about humans when I talk about evolution. I want to talk about bugs and plants and limbs and fishes, and in that case, the genetic entropy makes no sense at all.
Yeah. If whether you're looking at microbial genetics or sexually reproducing populations, either way, it just doesn't work. It literally doesn't hold up.
Yeah, there's the genetic drift takes care of 99% of it, and then the other part is that, and Neff and I had a debate, and he would not yield on this, but he insists that if you make one amino acid change in a protein, the protein will no longer work. And he insists on this over and over again. And actually, you can change something like, in some cases, 70% of the amino acids, and the protein will still do what it does.
There are some very good paper. I did a video, or we did a video on creationist. It's called Creationist Statistics.
Yeah, we
talk about this totally bunk calculation that Stephen Meyer did in his book Signature in the Cell, where he says the odds of a protein of 150 amino acids in length forming by chance is like one in 10 to the 164th power, something like that. Well, this it's just, he made it up. He literally just plucks numbers out of the air and multiplies them together, and it's totally hilariously bad. But in that video, we use it as kind of a springboard to talk about the evolvability of proteins, because as protein biologists will recognize, or do recognize, you can have like very diverse and even like conformationally damaged proteins, which will still do things. You can evolve these because proteins are highly evolvable.
Yes,
which is what the data show. That's why there are experiments where they're artificially selected. You have a recombinase which was evolved to cut out HIV in a genome. There are loads of experiments like that, and creationists don't talk about it because the upper people never talk about it. They just kind of shunt it all to the side, and they say, "Yeah, don't worry about that." The very closest they get is stuff like the E. coli experiment with Richard Lenski and it all. But the problem is, again, even still, they totally misrepresent what his findings are. Sanford said that, and we have the video on the genetic entropy video that we did, where he says, "Oh, it was all of it was loss. Everything, all the quote new proteins are just total loss. It's downregulated. Actually, that's a complete lie. The gene or the promoter region got shifted over, and that caused it to express the metabolize citrate, but on a different region. So, yeah,
Right.
no, it was
the gene was duplicated, and then
or under aerobic conditions. Sorry,
the regulation got screwed up, right? That was
the regulation got moved over, and that's what caused it. And so it just total bunk, total bogus.
Who's a guy on? I just can't. I know his name, but I can't find it right now. The guy with the 1 in 10 to the 74th. Basically, he proved that 1 in 10 to the 74th proteins.
Douglas Axe.
Douglas Axe. Okay. Did you read the other Douglas Axe paper?
I haven't, but that calculation, that's just one of a number of calculations like that, and they literally get different orders of magnitude for that sort of calculation. So
right, and what they don't tell you is that there's like, what the hell is it? There's another 10 to the 100 or 10 to the 80th proteins that do work in that same sequence space, right? And Douglas Axe has another paper that he wrote probably 5 years prior, where they did the same sort of statistics on some sort of I think it was in a bacteria, and they found out that 1 in 4 proteins worked in that entire sequence space, right?
That's hilarious.
And he said it was really surprising that 25% of them basically did the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The what they do is they mutate a section of the protein, and they see how whether or not it works, and then they just extrapolate that to the whole thing. Well, you got guys like Hubert Yockey who say, no, it's 1 in 10 to the 90th. Yeah. Okay, 1 in 10 to the 90th is pretty different from was it to the 60th or to the 74th, whatever. And then you have Robert Sauer, I think is his name, who is like, it's 1 in 10 to the 64th. They just the scale just completely varies across these sorts of calculations. But there are regular papers by protein biologists who cite the Axe paper. They say, well, the calculations have been done which say the odds of this happening are 1 in 10 to the 84th or 74th. And they're like, okay, but that's what their theoretical calculation is. Here's what we got with the actual experimentation.
It's a real calculation, right? Yeah. And the reason for that is the protein space is laid out in a network, right? So you've got a network, you've got a sequence space, and that network is, could be 20-dimensional or whatever. And the distance between one island and another island is the important part. Right. There could be one mutation difference between a protein that does one function and a protein that does an entirely different function, but most of the time they're clustered. So we don't have the computers or the mathematics to work out that sequence space. The very best computer we have is life itself, because life happened, and we know that there's a path through that sequence space, and we just have to figure out more about it. So, and that's some of the new biology that's being done, and some of the stuff with semiotics and all of that is approaching that this hierarchical view of life, and this look at these sequence spaces and basically fitness spaces, how a species evolves. And it's kind of amazing what they're coming up with is that life is this self-creating constraint system that basically self-creates and bootstraps itself into complexity. And they're trying to figure out the mathematics behind that. And so the whole thing that our friend Maddoxs, I call him, Maddoxs, is talking about, all these papers he's referring to are the papers that are solving the problem of abiogenesis and life itself, and what kind of a thing life is, what kind of a complexity creating thing it is. And he keeps glossing over that and coming up with complexity, therefore God, What I have the vexing part.
That's about the best argument they have.
I don't know. When I started this whole thing when I was about 12 years old, I fell in love with complexity, and I fell in love with sequence spaces and all of that. And that's how I got into it. So in a lot of, like when they say that my belief is a religion, yeah, kind of. It's sort of what I worship is complexity. But this, let's see. Oh, here's the switcheroo that Maddoxs came up with, and this is we're going off to another subject. We're all over the place, man. The vexing part, I call it the category switcheroo, is that like Maddoxs talks about what happens in the cell. And then he said, how could this be deterministic chemistry? Well, they will admit that there is no intelligence in what is happening in the cell right now. That all is chemistry, right? And what I was trying to get across, to him and Neff and Cell was that when you're a zygote, you're just one little clear cell, and if you look at it under the microscope, it looks like some gel in there and some parts, but it doesn't look like much, and you turn into you, and that is all chemistry. So when they say just deterministic,
but it's predetermined chemistry. Yeah.
Predetermined chemistry. So they believe in this like great, huge deterministic planner that can dig down and move every molecule, every quantum state in exactly the right way. It's just ridiculous. But I mean, if you want to look at something magical, just look into what is happening in a cell right now. If a cell can do that, if it can do me, then it can most certainly develop out of the ooze, and bootstrap itself into complexity, but I call that the switcheroo, where they'll talk about what's happening in the cell right now, and then they'll say, oh, it can't be deterministic, but it is. In every cell, it is deterministic today. It is just molecules bumping into molecules. Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I did with it. And then he came up with a fairly good summary at the end where he actually made a little bit of sense for a few minutes. And he just came up with his overall argument of creationism. And
Haldane's dilemma. That's Kamimo said, did you see the version of Haldane's dilemma he used? That's what genetic entropy is based on, but even Haldane admitted that the math was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
well, that's the other thing.
It's like, oh, well.
I have a crappy little video I put up the other day on reduction and ontology. And I'm looking into sort of the philosophy of reductive thinking and reductive science. And I put it up so I could get the transcript so I can redo it. But that's one of the things I'm going to get into, is that most of these guys, they will go into population genetics. They will get a undergraduate text. They'll get a formula like what Axe did with the 10 to the 72nd, and they'll do some calculation and find out that life is impossible. Well, no population geneticist worth his salt will admit that any one of those things are the model. None of those are the model. Right. They're all together. And when you start looking into coalescence theory, and then you go listen to that pointed-headed Jensen, pointy head Jensen, he is just so clueless as to what he's actually doing with that math. I mean, it's just
Mays. Yeah, in his debate with Mays, Mays pointed out, like, this is not something anyone is using, this calculation that you have used, which I thought was so funny about it. It's like, here's the guy that is, supposed to be their new tough guy on the block, and even the biologist he's talking to is like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. He was doing his whole book is so simplistic, and then he makes this break at some point where he says, well, if they can think this way, then we can too. Therefore, it was designed. It's just like he just makes this leap, and I can't believe that he made the leap. And I put the book down at that point, and I thought, yeah, I can't read this shit. I got better things to read.
Yeah. I sent I bought Replacing Darwin and sent it to RJ, and so he's going through that. And our hope is that with
I'm
the
watching
next,
that. Yeah.
And by the time we get to the next, or we get finished with the second volume of Rocks, maybe we'll have most of it done, because it's pretty threadbare as of right now. So I don't. My hope is that maybe we'll cover some of the stuff in it if there's anything. Yep. We went through that. Yeah. We compared the different. Is this a human or is it just an ape? Well, the fun thing is we're going to be doing that for birds and dinosaurs in the next book, and
cool.
It's even better. Because I don't know if I should tell you about it or just wait. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
how bad it is with the birds and dinosaurs. So
yep. Yeah, I have to look at that. Replacing Darwin, if I would like to try to give it a better read, and I wouldn't mind helping you guys out a little bit with it if there's anything you want me to look into or whatever. I'm pretty good at researching stuff and digging in. So
yeah, we're it's largely we're debunking the answers books. It's like we start with the answers books as our base, and then we use their topics that they're bringing up to go on sort of tangents about creationism generally, or what are a whole bunch of creationists saying on this topic. And so, and so we're that's kind of what we did with the first one, and that's what we're hoping to do with the second one. And I'm so glad that RJ agreed to do this with me. He adds so much more stuff that I would never have thought of or that I didn't know about. So
he's prolific. He's something else. Pretty amazing. I hope to I try to encourage him to give me a call about this other matter we talked about earlier with the papers. I would like to talk to him about it, because I need some of that data. Anyway, I bought that 4-volume set, or is it 4 volumes? The answer set.
It's 4.
Yeah. I think it was like $70. I can't believe I gave them money, but I tried to steal them, but I couldn't find anywhere to rob them. So
yeah, they
we don't promote stealing on this channel.
I thought originally it was only one book, and so when I proposed the rocks were there to RJ, I was like, we'll just go through and we'll go after the paleontology and biology stuff and geology. And then I realized, there are 3 more of these, and we were like, dang. And so now it's a 2-volume work.
They're chock full of fun, I'll tell you. I've got I think it's about 8 feet long now. I've got a bunch of creationist books on my library shelf, and I think I'm up to 8 feet. And I think I'm going to quit there. I don't know. Well, I keep finding new ones to buy, but I never get time to go through them because there's nothing to learn, really.
Yeah, you're right. I saw in what is it? Some creationist had posted on Twitter a segment of Michael Behe's new book, Darwin Devolves, which it's kind of funny, the whole obsession with Darwin when he's so irrelevant to biology today. But regardless, it's like Newton. Newton's doing astrophysics. No, but it's so funny that this guy took a segment of the book, and in that segment, Behe proposes, why is there no Galapagos finch phylum? Maybe because they only evolved 2 million years ago? Yeah. Like what? You think there should be a new phylum in 2 million years?
Yeah.
I think it's like, that's fractally stupid.
They think all those species evolved in 6,000, so all the cats and everything else.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I loved that, which also reminds me of Evo Grad's analysis, where he shows if you're going to use barcoding and use the human chimp cutoff, that means members of the same genus lions and tigers can't be related to each other.
Can't be related,
but both of them, but both of them are related to jaguars. I thought that was like perfect. That was pure gold.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Anyway. So much to do. Well, the nice thing about those creationist books is if I go and read one and I read one paragraph, then I spend the next week studying real books and real papers, trying to get the background of it. And so in a lot of ways, what I really like about Standing for Truth channel is that every time I get lazy and I decide to watch Netflix instead of study genetics, all I have to do is watch him for 5 minutes and I'm back in my books. So
it makes you angry. You got to go research.
Well, yeah, and they'll mention something that I don't know. And I'm like, I cannot stand shit that I don't know. It drives me crazy. So I have to go read about it, but it takes me a week for every damn thing they come up with. And that's why I insist we need 500 of us YouTubers for every one creationist on YouTube in order to keep up with them.
Well, fortunately, their core group is only like 6 or 7 people, so I think that's good for us.
Yeah, Erica calls it the brain trust, which I love.
The brain trust.
The brain trust. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Yep.
Yeah, it's as RJ says, they ignore or avoid upwards of or over 90% of the technical literature, and I think even that's an underestimate.
Underestimate 99.9%.
Yeah, it's kind of laughable how they pretend to be up on the literature. They'll cite the newest paper that came out, but there's a couple of decades worth of literature under this one paper,
right?
And they won't talk about any of that. They won't talk about or it's really the only ones that they think this is either a problem for the evolutionist or it helps us, whatever, and they have to debunk it or whatever. But there are like hundreds of papers published every month, and they ignore all of those except for one,
right? Because
it hit the news headlines, and that's why they looked at it. So
they get their stuff from I'd like a complete list of the Answers in Genesis and Evolution News and a few others. What I do when they come up with something, the first thing I do is try to do a search of those things, because invariably you'll find that they're represented there. Yeah. And now they've taken a few things from Cell Cordova and they've incorporated them, like this sign thing I was showing you. Mm-hmm. They're going to be talking about that for the next 6 months. You know what? I did a few months ago, I did a thing on ApoA1 Milano with Standing for Truth. And then Raw Matt came back at me because I criticized him because his paper did make sense. He referenced a paper claiming that ApoA1 Milano was epigenetic. And the paper he referenced was about the ApoA1 protein and how it gets clipped off before it leaves the cell, before it's,
it gets altered. Yeah.
Right. It gets altered. That was a paper he referenced, and it had nothing to do with ApoA1. It had nothing to do with the Milano mutation. And then they were saying it was epigenetic, and I showed them that no, basically there were those 2 cysteines, and it formed a dimer, and it was an actual mutation. It was not epigenetic. And then they went and tried to say, oh, yeah, but it lost function. It lost specificity. Well, then I showed them the paper that said actually the mutation is 5 times more active as an antioxidant than the original. So it didn't lose specificity. It got hyper good at what it did. And that's why these people are living for a long time. But they don't talk about it at all anymore. I want to take credit for that. I don't know.
That's funny. I have to thank you for that then, because it's funny you mentioned that, because when I had my one debate with Standing, I can't get him in a room with me anymore. When I had my one debate with him way back when, we predicted all the arguments he was going to make, which is why we pre-wrote my rebuttal. Right. We mentioned the Milano mutation because that was one of his talking points at the time. And we talked about how his concept of information doesn't make sense. Whether something gains specificity or loses specificity, according to him, there's no information gain either way. And so it's disingenuous of him to talk about specificity when you can't say anything about the information content either way. And so yeah, we talked about that. We covered that. And so I didn't do any research into that, the mutation specifically, beyond that it helps what is it, break down HDL. Or it raises the amount that they can take in. I didn't really do much research in it beyond that, so that's very funny, and I like that. I wasn't even aware of that, but that makes me smile. So
yeah, what the mutation does is it forms dimers and I think tetramers, and without the mutation it forms trimers and basically a whole bunch of different polymers. Well, the mutation causes it to stick together in a more synchronous fashion, so that it creates a better device. So, I mean, the mutation was a hell of a good, and it was a gain in information, basically. Well, not really, because ACT, I always ask Standing, what does GCTA turn into when it rusts? Does it turn into GC or like guanine tetraoxide? No, it turns into more GCTA. It doesn't rust. It just changes order. And it's very difficult to say that there's more information or less information. It's bullshit. That isn't how they use information in biology,
Correct. Yeah. It's I actually had a guy on Twitter. I was talking to a creationist, and this creationist was talking about information in the genome. And actually, this guy who was a bioinformatist, informatician, whatever. He comes in. He's like, that's not at all how we use information theory, with regard to mathematics or genetics. And so, I'm not versed in the information theory and how it's applied mathematically or anything like that. But it when they try to apply it genetically or try to apply it to genetic systems, it does seem very disingenuous. It seems like there's no way you could ever, even when you have something which is a total gain, like you have a duplication and then it gains a new function, so it's neo-functionalized. It could never be a gain of information. It's like literally impossible. Yeah. And so it's, of course, that's intended. It's intended to be impossible for us to ever have that. So yeah.
Yeah, they're what Maddoxs didn't count on is that 10 years ago or not, well, let's see, 8 years ago in 2012, that's when I got into the whole biosemiotics thing and the basically the new ways of looking at biology. And I got into it through neuroscience because I was primarily into neuroscience up until 2 years ago when I started studying genetics. And it has to do with things, with very new ideas about consciousness and the mind, and what the mind is, how the mind works, how the brain works, all of that, and it all relates. But I had been into it, so I mean, I'm like, okay, fine. If you want to call DNA a code, call it a code. It actually is. It works like a code, and we can look at it that way. But you still don't have a point. You do not have a point.
It works precisely not like a computer, not like a program. The genetic code, the fact that the code is mutated and neo-functionalizes and sub-functionalizes and all these sorts of things. This is precisely what computers don't do. A computer has, you have like your specific code which does this thing, and you can use that in different contexts, but it's always that one thing.
Right.
But no, with genes, they're constantly evolving and they come to be a different thing and all that sort of stuff. So precisely not like a computer.
Yeah, I've been coding for 40 years. Basically, I work in Ruby and C and Python and React now. And if I shut my computer off at night and I came back the next day and my function had mutated or had created a bunch of duplicates of itself, I'd be pretty pissed. Right. I can't deal with this. I mean, I'd find another profession. No, it's the the fact that we can represent biochemical and that's why I want to do this thing on reduction, because I've noticed that biochemists are more likely to be ideas than molecular biologists, because biochemists see these pathways that they draw, these pictures, and they see these like pristine pathways in machines, whereas molecular biologists will see a big puddle of mud. It's very, it's a lot more messy when you start looking into all of what's going on in the cell. And in the cell, I'm guessing that at any one time, 20% of the proteins that you have in your cell are accidents, and they're going to be eaten by a proteasome. I think a proteasome. I forget what the name of it is. And anyway, they're going to be torn down and eaten and thrown away because there's accidents happening all the time. But the interesting thing is that if you stress out a population, like Ledsky did with his bacteria, you'll find that some of those accidents all of a sudden become good ideas. And that is what happens with evolution over and over again. We have this mass of things going on in the cell, and I kind of want to create a layman's version of looking at the cell more realistically. And I'm hoping to, I'm trying to figure out some of this software for doing YouTube presentations. Having a hell of a time with that. I'm better at genetics than I am figuring out somebody else's software. But I want to basically depict what is actually going on in a cell and in life. And it's a very, very different picture than what Foz Rana will come up with. It's hopefully.
Yeah, it's very messy. There's a lot of stuff going on, all kind of bumping into each other at once and trying to cross cell membranes and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, you want to credit the designer with that?
Yeah. Well, it's a goddamn mess. I think it.
I mean, good luck, I guess.
It proves the spaghetti monster is what it does, because it's spaghetti code. So I think it's proof for the spaghetti monster.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like he thought,
right. I actually.
Okay.
Do what?
I had nothing. I got nothing. I'm burning.
I was just saying, I had Rana on my channel a little while back. He's very good with like countering creationism and that kind of stuff. We had him talk about how soft tissue can be preserved in fossils for millions of years.
Oh, really?
That was a very interesting conversation. Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. He because he's a biochemist, he understands the chemistry involved with preserving the soft tissue for millions of years.
Right.
Very interesting. He actually wrote a whole book on it, and they sent that to me. So I haven't read it yet because I'm so many books to read.
I know.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I've got. I don't know if you can see my stack on my desk back here that's open. It's pretty nasty. It's.
I've been reading this for a while, or I was reading it in school. Yeah, very interesting books by Richard Prum. It's all about the evolution of beauty is about sexual selection. It talks about birds and how they have all these different mating displays and all this sort of stuff. It's very interesting, fascinating book. Beautiful descriptions of mating rituals between birds. And I was reading it while we were in school, and then coronavirus, and so I haven't been reading any books recently, just the technical papers. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going after doing programming. I'm working on going through my genetics courses. I'm taking a bioinformatics course, and I'm working on the tetrapod limb. So I guess I need to focus. And then Maddoxs keeps getting me off into bioinformatics or into biosemiotics. But I have full days. I'm unemployed now, so that's going to be more productive. I'm a contractor, so my contract ended about a week ago. So now I can focus on this for a while, get a new contract. So, and things have kind of dried up with COVID. The leads are like I used to get 15 a day. I'm getting like 1 or 2 now, job leads. So I have time. Are you still in school?
Yep. I get my bachelor's degree this December. In field and organismal biology.
I'm excited.
Yeah, field and organismal biology. I'd like to be a zoologist or evolutionary biologist. You know, the field that the imaginary science field.
Yeah.
What I'm excited for,
See this
and I'll
guy?
post this as yeah.
I like insects.
Insects are pretty neat. I was actually just writing about insects yesterday.
Yeah.
But what's I'm excited for when I get my bachelor's degree is I'm going to post on Twitter a picture of me with it, and I'm going to say with my first degree, I'm not thinking college or high school diploma. I'll say with my first degree, I now have one more degree than Dr. Kent Hovind. And so when it gets to December, I'm gonna love that post.
Yes, good.
I've been ruminating on that for months. So, man,
You got I can't get who the hell debated him? David. Yeah.
oh,
I've never seen that before.
oh
And
man,
why?
all these people.
Why are they giving Hovind a place at all? I mean, I can't. His debates are the same every time. He never says anything different. There's a man I cannot watch at all.
Oh yeah.
He has nothing new ever.
Well, I don't watch creationists generally, so.
Yeah, well, it's my job. Somebody got to do it, so I do it.
Well, I guess that's fair. I can't stand the RJ is like vaguely amused by it. I'm not. I just get angry, and like when RJ and I were debating Neff, and Neff didn't know what a carbohydrate was. I just get mad about that kind of stuff. I'm like, why am I wasting my time with this idiot? You know, and that's sort of. RJ says it's because I'm young. I don't know. Maybe he's right, but
no,
it just burns me up.
Lately, I Standing for Truth will come out with a new video, and I'll watch 5 minutes of it. And I've been bailing. I just don't have the heart anymore. I usually go get the transcripts and I try to analyze a piece of it or whatever, because I like analyzing arguments. You know, laying them out like I did here. You know, this guy. There's no meat in this guy, though. I mean, this whole thing is one big sentence. Like, I had trouble finding breaks. But anyway, Standing for Truth, I want to analyze some of his debate tactics and arguments, because I think it's interesting how people, interact. I don't know. But I don't have the heart for it anymore. I'll listen to it far enough to pick a paper or see them flash a paper, and I'll go read the damn paper. So, but I don't know. I'm trying. Anyway, getting late. So
yeah, I've got work a little while later.
Yep.
Today, unfortunately.
An actual job, like where you leave the house.
Cashier. Yep. That's what I'm doing. That's how I make money right now. They
really.
I put in an application at the aquarium here right before coronavirus, and of course they close the aquarium, and everything, or to the public, and so yeah,
that's what my ex-wife does, and I really feel bad for her because she's older, and if she gets this thing, it's may end her life, and she's exposed to that every day. And programmers, we can sit home and work at home. We've kind of got it made. There's a lot of people that have to go out there. It bothers me. But yeah, well, you're one of the
somebody's
warriors.
got to do it. Yeah.
You're one of the warriors that are going out there. Just stay safe and try to keep it contained.
I have to keep my anger contained sometimes, because I have idiots who come and tell me their conspiracy theories about the
5G,
the coronavirus, and actually none of them have said anything about 5G. They're all it's not as bad as the epidemiologists say it is.
Right.
They're like, it's the flu or whatever. This is totally political. And I've actually read some of the technical literature on the coronavirus, and I will come down on them about it. And they just kind of go, oh, well, and then I'm like, have a nice day. And off they go. And so I'll just come down on them. So
Yeah, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, we had 7,900 cases last week, and
Jeez.
look at this now. And everybody say, "Oh, it's just testing. It's just testing." Well, I don't give a shit what it is. Those numbers are looking pretty evil to me. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Minnesota, bothersome. So anyway, stay safe. But good
I will
talk.
endeavor to do so.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. You guys could invite me on once in a while. I'd come see if I could compete with RJ. I don't think I could, but every now and then you can get a word in. He is
Yeah. Well, he's a walking encyclopedia, so
he is. He's just amazing. Yeah, I like him. So, okay. So we'll sign off.
thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Goodbye. I don't know how to end.